Hello and welcome. Before we begin, feel free to subscribe and let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how are you feeling today? Your presence here truly matters. He used to kiss my forehead and say I made the world feel safe. Now I sleep with the door locked, listening for footsteps that once meant comfort. People ask when it all began, but I think the real question is, when did I stop pretending it hadn't? One pot of boiling water changed everything, but the truth had been simmering for years. I never wanted to live with them. That's the honest truth. When I sold my condo and moved into the garden suite of my son's house 3 years ago, it was supposed to be temporary, just until I recovered from my hip surgery, just until they got back on their feet after the second baby, just until. There's always a just until, and then it's been over 1,000 days. And you're still folding someone else's laundry in a house where even the dog doesn't seem to know your name. The suite was never really mine. It didn't have a separate entrance, and the so-called kitchenette had a microwave that sparked and a mini fridge that moaned at night like it was haunted. But I made it work. I brought my own kettle, my good blanket, and the carved spoon Paul gave me on our 20th anniversary. A little shrine to the woman I used to be, tucked between drywall and expectations. Tommy, he insists on Tom now, told me I was a lifesaver, said the kids needed grandma around, said I made everything smoother. What he didn't say was that smoother meant invisible, that it meant being the one to start the dishwasher after midnight, to drive to Costco for almond milk because Candace's stomach is sensitive, to slip an extra 100 into the gas fund and pretend I'd forgotten about it by morning. That morning started like most others. I was boiling water for pasta, elbow macaroni, the only kind the little one, Maisie, would eat without a tantrum. Candice had left early, claiming an emergency strategy meeting at her gym. Tom was home, pacing between rooms like a man late for a life that hadn't materialized yet. I asked if he wanted lunch. Just a question. He didn't answer. The water started to boil, rolling, angry bubbles, and I turned down the heat, reaching for the colander. That's when he stormed in. "Why is this crap always on the stove?" he barked, pointing at the pot like it had offended him personally. I blinked. "It's for Maisie's lunch." Jesus, Ma. I've got a Zoom call in 10 minutes, and the kitchen smells like a school cafeteria. I stared at him. He wasn't dressed for any meeting. He hadn't shaved. His laptop wasn't even open. "You could have just said something," I murmured. No need to shout. That was the wrong thing to say. I could see it, the way his jaw tensed, the way he moved closer, like my words had cut deeper than they should have. For a second, he looked like someone else entirely. Someone I didn't know, and maybe hadn't known for a long time. "Don't start with me," he said low. "Not today." I straightened up. My knees popped like bubble wrap, but I met his eyes. "Don't talk to me like that in my own house." That did it. His hand shot out, not at me, but toward the stove, and in one violent sweep, he shoved the pot clear off the burner. The sound it made was monstrous. Water hit the linoleum with a hiss. Steam shot up like a ghost. The handle clanged against the cabinet, and then the pain came. It didn't register right away. Just a flash of wet heat across my thigh and the tender part of my left hand. Then it tore through me like a scream I didn't get to make. I dropped the colander, fell back against the counter. My hand was blistering fast. Red, angry, slick with boiling water. My legs seared under my pants. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Tom froze. He didn't move toward me, didn't speak. Just stood there, one foot in the puddle, the other already halfway out the door. I sank to the floor. Candace found me like that 10 minutes later. She screamed, grabbed a towel, called 911. I couldn't even talk. My throat wouldn't work. My body shook from shock. Tom was nowhere to be found. The EMTs arrived fast. A young woman named Dee with a braid down her back and a man who smelled like cigarettes and spearmint. They said things like second-degree burn, probable tissue damage, clean wrap and transport. I nodded. Or maybe I didn't. It's hard to remember through that kind of pain. The police showed up too. A woman officer asked me what happened. I could have told her the truth, that my son lost control, that this wasn't the first time he scared me, just the first time it left a mark. But I didn't. I slipped, I said, knocked it over myself. The officer didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But I played the part. Trembling voice, little laugh. So clumsy at my age. She asked again, gently. I repeated it. Later, in the ER, a nurse gave me morphine and said it would be okay. I didn't believe her, because there are burns that heal and burns that don't. And what my son did that day, it scorched more than skin. The pain faded before the rage did. By the time I was back home, with gauze wrapped around my left hand like a mummy's glove and a thick bandage covering my thigh, Tom had returned. He didn't say a word when I came through the door, just looked up from his phone like I'd interrupted a podcast. Not a single question. Not even a sorry you slipped. Nothing. Candace fluttered behind me, nervous as a moth, offering tea I didn't want and asking if I was okay to walk by myself or... I was. I'd walked through worse. I shuffled back to the garden suite, every step scraping through the raw patch of memory that hadn't yet scabbed over. Sat down on my sagging armchair and exhaled into the silence. My leg throbbed. My hand pulsed in time with my heart. But what I felt most, deep in my chest, was something else entirely. Something colder. Like a pane of glass finally cracking after years of pressure. The next few days passed in a kind of dull haze. Candace was overly kind, performative even, dropping off meals I didn't ask for, speaking too brightly in front of the kids. Tom avoided me altogether. We existed in parallel, passing ghosts in a haunted house with granite countertops and color-coded storage bins. On the third morning, I logged into the joint account we'd opened when I moved in. The one I used to deposit my pension. The password didn't work. I tried again, and again. Locked. I called the bank. A very polite man with a very bored voice told me the account had recently undergone an access level change. Only one authorized user now. Tom. My name had been removed. Removed. My voice cracked once. Just once, when I asked how that was possible. The man apologized, said it looked like a new authorization document had been submitted 2 weeks ago. Electronic signature. IP from this address. If you believe this was done fraudulently, we do recommend filing a report with... I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank computer screen. My hand throbbed under the bandage. My bank card was still in my wallet, but now it was nothing more than plastic. That night, I found the folder. I hadn't opened it in years. Yellowed newspaper clippings, old school reports, one photo of Tom at 17, glaring at the camera in a court hallway. Assault charge. Back when he got into a fight at a football game. Punched another boy so hard, he broke 2 teeth. I had stood by him then. Claimed the other boy started it. Paid the legal fees. Convinced Paul not to send him to military school. I'd told myself back then, he just needs time. He's 45 now. Time's up. I stared at that photo and realized I'd been protecting the wrong person for most of my life. Later that night, Maisie wandered into my suite. Candice was in the shower. Tom was probably up in his home office pretending to job search. The little girl climbed up on my lap like she always did, careful not to touch my bandaged hand. "Grandma," she said, her voice muffled in my sweater. "Daddy says you're going to move away." I froze. "What do you mean, baby?" "He said your room's going to be an office. That you're going to go to a care place." "What's a care place?" I felt my throat tighten. "It's a place where old people live. Like a big house. With nurses. Are you going?" I swallowed. Not unless someone makes me. She nodded solemnly, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a candy bracelet, sticky and half-eaten. You can have this if you stay. I smiled at her, not a warm smile, a cracked one, like the kind you put on when your heart is shivering inside your ribs. After she went back upstairs, I sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, I called the number on the card the ER nurse had handed me. It was still wedged in my wallet, behind my Medicare card. Adult Protective Services. I didn't say much, just that I had a few questions. The woman on the line listened. She didn't push. She gave me another number. A legal aid clinic. I wrote it down. That same afternoon, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and took photos of my burns. My hand, my thigh, my neck, which had bruised where I hit the counter. I emailed them to myself, just in case. Tom came home late, reeking of whiskey and failure. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea. He stomped in like the floor offended him, grabbed a beer, didn't look at me. I heard you called someone, he muttered. I didn't answer. He looked at me then, not like a son, like a man looking for someone to blame. Don't start something you can't handle, Ma. I held his gaze. My hand rested on the kettle, and for the first time in years, I saw the tiniest flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Good. Let him wonder what I'd do next. The next morning came with fog thick enough to blur the edges of the neighbor's fence. I stood at the window holding my mug with both hands, not because I needed the warmth, but because it helped steady the shaking. I hadn't slept. Not really. Not with that last look Tom gave me still playing in my head, like a bad commercial stuck on repeat. I had crossed some invisible line, and he knew it. The balance had shifted, just a fraction, but enough to make the air around us feel different. Electrified. Cautious. I didn't tell him where I was going that day, just dressed in my good slacks, the ones with the stitched crease, and put on lipstick for the first time in weeks. I left the house with a canvas tote, not a purse, something that looked less like legal documents and more like farmer's market. The legal aid clinic was in a squat building behind a used bookstore and a vape shop. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and a gumball machine with a handwritten out of order sign. A young woman at the desk asked if I had an appointment. I didn't. She said to wait. I did. My name was called by a woman in her 60s with cropped silver hair and a navy pantsuit that said she didn't take nonsense before noon. Linda Harper. She didn't smile when we shook hands, but she looked me in the eye and didn't once glance at her phone. I've seen worse, she said, after I showed her the photos on my phone. But not by much. Second degree, definitely. How recent? 3 weeks. And you live with the man who did it? Yes. Any police report? No. I lied. Said it was an accident. She nodded. Most do. I handed her a printed copy of the old bank statement. The new one, too. She raised an eyebrow. He locked you out of your own account? It was our joint account. He just made it his. That's theft. I kept my face still. She didn't need to see the shame behind it. What do you want to do, Gwendolyn? I didn't answer right away. But when I did, my voice was steadier than I expected. I want it on record, and I want to make sure he doesn't do to me what he's probably planning to do next. Linda sat back. Then we start with an affidavit. Medical proof of injury. Witness testimony, if you've got it. And we file for an emergency restraining order if things escalate. I nodded. Can you help me do all that? She didn't hesitate. Yes. When I left the clinic, my tote was heavier with paperwork, and my steps felt lighter than they had in months. I didn't go straight home. I took the long way. Past the elementary school where Tom used to cry when I left him at the door, past the park where he once fell off the jungle gym and needed 7 stitches. So many places I'd loved him in, so many memories that didn't protect me from the man he'd become. That evening, I found an email in my inbox from a local journalist. Somehow, They'd gotten wind of something. A legal aid clerk had passed along a compelling case involving elder abuse, anonymously, of course. The reporter wanted to talk, off the record. I didn't reply. Not yet. The next day, Candice didn't speak to me over breakfast. She passed the butter wordlessly, looked through me like I was part of the cabinetry. I knew that look. It was guilt, the kind you can't admit to having. Then, around noon, a neighbor texted me. A link. It was a short article, barely 5 paragraphs. But it was there. Local woman alleges. Elder abuse in family home, investigation pending. No names. Just G, no photos. Yet, by 5 o'clock, Tom knew. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the wine glasses. I was sitting in the living room, rereading the legal packet from Linda. "You talked to a reporter?" he barked. "No. But someone did. Apparently." He stared at me, jaw twitching, fists curling at his sides. "Do you have any idea what this could do to my reputation?" I laughed. A short, bitter thing. "What reputation, Tom?" "You haven't had a job in 4 years." His hand twitched. Just a flicker. And for a second, I thought he might lunge. Instead, he turned, stormed out, and the tires squealed as he backed out of the driveway. I locked my door. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't know. "This is Detective Alvarez," a calm voice said. "We've been assigned to follow up on a tip regarding your injuries. We'd like to schedule a formal interview." My heart knocked once, then settled. "Tomorrow," I said. "I'll be ready." Detective Alvarez arrived the next morning at precisely 9 o'clock. She wore her badge clipped to her belt, her hair in a sleek ponytail, and her eyes were the kind that didn't miss much. She didn't smile, but she was gentle, like someone who knew how many ways a person could break without leaving bruises. We sat at the little kitchen table in my suite. She placed a recorder between us and began with the basics. My name, date of birth, the date of the incident. Her voice was steady, neutral, like reading ingredients off a soup can. But I could tell she was watching everything. How I held my coffee with my unbandaged hand. How I shifted in my chair when I said my son's name. I told her everything. Not just about the pot of boiling water, but the months before that, the bank account, the way he'd started locking doors, making decisions without asking, erasing me like chalk on a sidewalk. I showed her the photos of my burns, the emails from the bank, even the copy of that old newspaper clipping from when Tom was 17. She didn't flinch. "We'll need to talk to your daughter-in-law," she said finally, snapping off the recorder. "Good luck," I said. "She pretends none of this is happening." "We'll see." By that afternoon, Candice had been interviewed. I knew because she came home early, face pale, fingers trembling as she scrolled through her phone. We didn't speak. She closed herself in their bedroom, and I could hear her pacing for hours. Tom didn't come home at all. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Legal stationery. Inside, notice of a countersuit. Tom was suing me for defamation. The words sat like bricks in my chest. "Baseless claims," it read. "Mentally unstable. Seeking attention. History of erratic behavior." He wanted damages. Financial and emotional. He was going to destroy me in court. I stared at the paper until it blurred. Then I picked up my phone and called Linda Harper. "I figured this might happen," she said, not surprised in the slightest. "It's a scare tactic, and a stupid one. Can he win?" "Only if we let him." That day, Linda filed a restraining order request and a counter motion. The legal process was moving faster now, pulled along by pressure from the police and that article, which had quietly gone viral in local forums. People had started posting in the comment sections. "Is this about the woman on Weston Drive? She used to bring muffins to the park. Her son's a drunk. Everyone knows." By the end of the week, the second article came out, this time with more detail. Still no names, But the story was clear. An older woman, living with her son, suffering injuries under suspicious circumstances, bank fraud, abuse. It hit like a grenade. A parent at Maisie's preschool shared the article on Facebook. Someone from the PTA posted a long status about believing victims. My neighbor Susan, the one with too many wind chimes, came by with a casserole and the softest, most awkward hug I've ever received. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was exposed. That weekend, Tom returned. I was on the porch with a blanket over my knees, watching two squirrels fight over a piece of stale bread. I heard his car before I saw it, tires crunching gravel like bones. He parked crooked in the driveway and came stomping up the walk. "You think you've won?" he growled, towering over me. I didn't flinch. "You think dragging this into the street is going to get you sympathy? You're ruining my life." "No, Tom," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, slapped it on the table beside me. "I'm getting custody of the kids," he spat. "And you'll never see them again." Then he turned and left. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. I already knew what it was. More threats dressed up in legalese. That night, Candace knocked on my door. She didn't come in, just stood there in her robe, eyes glassy and red-rimmed. "I talked to the detective again," she said softly. I waited. I told her the truth. My breath caught. I saw what happened. The day with the pot. I froze. I didn't want to believe it. "Why now?" She looked down. "He yelled at Maisie yesterday. Really yelled. She cried for hours. I realized, if I keep pretending, she's next." For the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. Candace nodded. "I'll testify. Whatever you need." When she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, fingers curled around the edge of the envelope Tom had left. I didn't need to open it. The truth was finally loud enough. By the following week, the court issued a temporary restraining order against Tom. He was ordered to vacate the property, surrender his firearms, and maintain a 100-foot distance from me at all times. A deputy delivered the notice while he was still asleep upstairs. Candace said he looked like someone had dropped ice water on his chest. He didn't argue, just packed a duffel bag and left without a word. The front door didn't slam. It clicked. For the first time in 3 years, the house exhaled. Candace stayed quiet most of that day. She hovered between guilt and relief, moving softly, like someone stepping across thin ice. She didn't apologize, not directly, but she made me tea without asking and took the kids out so I could have the house to myself. That night, I opened the shoebox I kept at the back of my closet, the one with the deed to the house, some old bonds, Paul's last letter before he died. I found the property transfer documents Tom had me sign when I moved in. Back then, he said it was for streamlining taxes. I believed him. But looking at them now, I saw the truth. He'd listed himself as sole owner. My signature had been copied, not written. I knew my own pen pressure. The curve of the G was wrong. I scanned the documents and emailed them to Linda. The next morning, she called me before I finished my toast. "We've got him," she said. "Forgery, fraud, possibly coercion. It's more than enough to reopen the deed under elder abuse statutes." And just like that, the walls began to fall. The court froze all activity on the house. He couldn't sell it, borrow against it, or evict me. Not that he'd have the chance. The police asked for a handwriting sample. They got it. Everything was happening faster now, like someone had finally removed the brakes from my life. Then came the custody hearing. Not mine, of course. Candace was filing for temporary custody of Maisie and Jordan, citing Tom's escalating volatility and the open investigation into his abuse. I wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but I waited in the hallway, dressed in my best blouse and the brooch Paul's mother gave me. When Candy stepped out, she was crying. but smiling. "We got it," she said. He wouldn't see the kids without court supervision. And for the time being, he wasn't coming back to the house. A social worker would be visiting within the week. CPS was involved. So was the bank and the state attorney's office. I went home and turned on every light in my suite. Later that night, Tom showed up. Not at the door, in the driveway. He stood by the mailbox, yelling, red-faced, slurring. "You ruined my life, you old witch," he screamed into the wind. "You think you won?" The kids were awake. Candace called the police. I watched from the window as 2 officers approached him. He kept yelling. Then he shoved one of them. That was all it took. They cuffed him right there by the curb, flashing lights against the siding. Neighbors peeking through curtains. I stood back, out of sight, but I saw the moment he looked up at the house. He didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a man who'd burned every bridge and was only now realizing he was standing in the middle of the river. The next morning, the porch was quiet. The kids were still asleep. Candace was at the table, reading through legal papers with a pen in her teeth. I made coffee. 1 cup. For me. When I sat down, she looked up and said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For waiting so long." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Some truths didn't need narration. That afternoon, Linda called with more news. The DA had offered Tom a deal: restitution, mandatory counseling, and probation, in exchange for a guilty plea on forgery and elder abuse. I agreed. It wasn't about punishing him anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine. That evening, I went up into the attic, the one I hadn't stepped into since moving in, and found a stack of watercolors I painted years ago. One caught my eye: a doorway, half open, light spilling through. I framed it and hung it above my desk. The house still creaked the same. The stairs still moaned under my feet. But it felt different now. It was mine. It took 3 more months for the paperwork to finish winding through the courts. Legal time moves like syrup in winter. Slow, sticky, resistant to urgency. But it moved. And when it was done, the house title was in my name. Sole owner, Gwendolyn M. Winslow. Tom didn't contest it. Not after the deal was finalized. He pled guilty to 1 count of elder abuse and 1 of fraud. The judge gave him 18 months of probation, mandatory therapy, and restitution payments, which frankly, I'll never see a cent of. But I didn't care. He was barred from coming within 200 feet of me or the property. His access to the children would be determined by a family court, one that now had a very thick folder with his name on it. He moved out of state a week later. Colorado, I heard. Someone said he got a job at an auto parts warehouse. I didn't check. Didn't want to. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. The house got quieter after that. Peaceful even. The kind of quiet you feel in your bones. Candace and the kids stayed for a while. Long enough for her to find her footing, apply for a new job at a nearby preschool, and save enough for a rental townhouse 10 minutes down the road. When they left, it wasn't with tension or bitterness, just boxes, hugs, and a tearful thank you from Candace that she tried to say without crying and failed miserably. Maisie gave me a drawing of us holding hands, stick figures with matching gray hair. I keep it on my fridge. With the house to myself, I made changes, big ones. Tore up the beige carpet and replaced it with dark oak laminate. Painted the kitchen cabinets a shade of green that reminded me of my mother's house in Ohio. Got rid of the guest bed in the garden suite and turned the room into an art studio. Yes, art. I started painting again. Nothing fancy. Watercolors mostly. Hands, shadows, glass bowls filled with fruit. The burn scar on my thigh stiffened in the mornings, but I used that too. Pain had shape, color, movement. I learned to use it. One morning, I framed a painting of my hand, half covered in gauze, curled gently over a white bedsheet. The background was a mess of warm reds and oranges. Fire, maybe, or something leaving. I hung it in the front hallway. And then something funny happened. I got invited to speak. Someone from the legal aid clinic forwarded my story to a community group advocating for elder protection. They called, asked if I'd share what happened. I said no. Then I said maybe. Then I said yes. The first talk was in a church basement. I stood behind a lectern that wobbled slightly to the left and spoke to a room full of gray hair, bifocals, and quiet dignity. When I told them about the boiling water, no one gasped. They just nodded. They knew. After that, there were more talks. A podcast interview. A column in the local paper titled, "Don't Call It a Family Dispute." Even a segment on a regional news show. Me sitting in my sunroom, sipping tea from a mug that said, "Ask me about my scars." I became, somehow, a voice. One afternoon, I got a letter. Thick cream paper, neat cursive. The White House Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protection invited me to Washington for a roundtable. Expenses paid. They wanted my voice, my story, my scars. I said yes. I wore a navy blue suit with shoulder pads and pearl buttons. Carried a handbag that used to be Paul's mother's. Sat in a room with senators and surgeons and women like me who had once been told to be quiet, be patient, be family. I didn't cry during my speech, but the woman across from me did. And when I got home, tired but full in a way I hadn't felt in decades, I made myself a pot of tea. I sat in my favorite chair in the garden suite, which was now my reading room, and looked at the painting of my hand. There was no bitterness left, no guilt, just fire, color, and shape. I survived, and more than that, I finished the story myself.